Once we have zipcaller connected to our phone system and we have created the call flows that we will be using in our campaigns, it's time to create the campaign. From the campaign section, we can click create here and start filling the form. So the first thing we need to create here is a name, my campaign, for example. We can specify if the type will be static or dynamic. The difference here is that a static campaign can only change the numbers to call, adding or removing numbers, while the campaign is in draft mode. On the other side, if we select dynamic, then we will be able to add or remove numbers to call once the campaign has started. If we will be using the REST API, for example, to add numbers to call to a campaign, then dynamic campaign should be selected. In the tags section, we will be able to assign specific tags to the campaign. What is this? This is something that lets you give visibility to the campaign to specific users. When you create users here in the settings section, you will see that you will be able to assign specific tags to your users. Then, if a campaign has some tags set, then only users having those tags will be able to see that campaign. A campaign having no tags will be visible to all users, of course, having the permissions to view the campaign. For the mode, we can select power dialer or predictive dialer. A power dialer is a dialer that will make calls as fast as possible. It will try to um, occupy all the channels, all the simultaneous calls that your license allows you to use, and also the limit that you have specified for your phone system extension. But as long as there are free simultaneous calls, zipcaller will try to make those calls. On the other side, if you select predictive dialer, zipcaller will try to adjust the calling pace to the number of agents that you have in your queue. In this case, you will need to select, for example, well, here we will select a phone system and an extension, and for predictive dialer, you need to specify a queue. This is the queue that will be monitored. And zipcaller will start reporting using the zipcaller proxy. It will start reporting the status of the queue in real time, so zipcaller knows when it's time to make calls and when it's time to pause. The calling intensity level parameter here lets you configure or tailor the behavior of the predictive dialer algorithm. How's that? Well, uh, the predictive dialer can behave in different ways, and there is not a right way or a wrong way. This is something that you as a user need to define. What's best for your company? You could have, for example, a scenario in which you want that all your agents are always busy, always dealing with calls, and you don't care if your customers are waiting on the queue. In that case, you can set the calling intensity level to a value higher than 1, to a value on the positive range. If you move this slider to the right, you will cause that zipcaller makes more calls than the average, so there are always calls waiting on the queue and your agents will be always busy. On the other side, you may want to um, tailor the behavior of the predictive dialer to focus on quality. What this means, This means that you want that your customers get connected to an agent immediately as soon as they receive the call. So they should not be waiting on the queue. You should always have an available agent to deal with these calls. So if that's your scenario and you want to focus on quality, then you should use a value on the negative range. A value on the left means that SIP-caller will try to leave some free agents. So in case SIP-caller makes more calls and um, these calls are transferred to the queue, then you will always have a free agent ready to take those calls. If you configure the value just in the middle, in the zero value, this means that SIP-caller will try to make exactly calls to complete all the available agents that you have, but not causing that you have calls waiting on the queue. Of course, this is an ideal scenario, and in some cases it's not possible to achieve. Um, because of how the predictive dialer works, the algorithm works, SIP-caller estimates a transfer rate based on the history of the calls, and it determines that, for example, only 40% of the calls that are made by SIP-caller are finally transferred to the agent. Maybe the other 60% are finished because the destination is busy, or the call is not answered, or an answering machine is answering the call, and those calls are discarded. Then only 40% of the calls are sent to the queue. So what does it mean? It means that if we have 4 free agents and we need to make calls for these free agents, for these 4 agents, we need to make 10 calls and not 4 calls. Because if we make 10 calls, only 4 of them will be transferred to the queue. This is something that we can estimate, and in the reality, things can happen in a different way. When we make these 10 calls, maybe only 3 are transferred to the queue, or maybe 5 are transferred to the queue and not exactly 4. This is something that could happen and will happen. And this toggle, this setting, lets you control what you want to do in those cases. If you want to have a bit of margin in the number of available agents, so you leave 1 or 2 agents free, so in case you have more calls, then it's not a problem because you anyway have a free agent to handle that call. Or if you move it to the right, then uh, it's the case that you have um, you are sure that you will be making more calls, so in any case you will have calls waiting on the queue, so your agents have calls to deal with. Okay. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is defining the working times for the campaign. You can specify the date in which the campaign will start, okay, and you can specify a date in which the campaign will end. This doesn't need to be the current date. You can schedule the campaign to start next week, for example. But you need to specify a date for the beginning and a date for the end. If you want to define holidays, you can specify them here. Holidays are specified in the settings section. The actual dates of the holidays are configured in the settings section. Here you just select the group. You could have different groups because your company could have branches in different countries, for example. So if you are running a campaign for one country, you specify the holidays for that country. If you run campaigns for the other country, you specify the holidays for this other country. You specify the time zone, and you can easily define here which hours the campaign should be active. You can turn on or off any 30-minute blocks here, and you can copy the configuration to the right, you can copy the configuration to the left. If you decide that Wednesday you don't have calls, then you can clear it, or you can complete it like this. Um, well, this is very simple to configure. Just turn on and off the times that you want operation and the times in which you don't want operation, and zipcaller will follow the rules. You have one column for each day of the week, and the last column is for Sundays and holidays. So if the current date is a holiday, it doesn't mean that we will not have calls. It means that we will follow the configuration from this column. In the behavior tab, we can specify, for example, a call prefix like 9. This is a prefix that we will be adding to all the numbers that we will be calling. This could be, for example, to select an outbound rule, to select a specific zip trunk, or a billing code, or where there are different reasons for which you can specify a prefix here. Um, Next, you can specify the ring timeout. This is how long you want the call, the destination to ring, and after this timeout, after this time, we will abort the call and consider it as no answer. You can specify how many times you want to call each number. Of course, the retries only happen if the first attempt is not successful. If we consider a call successful, the call will not be retried. And you can specify, in the case of a retry, you can specify the mean retry interval. This means if we have a no answer, for example, or a busy call, when will we retry it? In this case, 1 hour later. Okay, we can specify which is the minimum time that we need to wait for the call to be retried. We say minimum time because if we are, for example, a Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. and we have a retry interval of 1 hour, and the retry should be at 6:30, then um, the call will not be retried at 6:30 because that time is off. So it will be retried the next day on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Okay, so this is why we say that this is a minimum retry interval and not uh, exactly the retry interval, because we have no guarantee that we will be calling the user again at this time. Regarding the answering machine detection, this is a feature that can be enabled or can be disabled. You can decide here if you want to enable or you want to disable. Because of how the answering machine works, you might want to disable it. The answering machine algorithm is listening to the audio of the recipient of the call, and we do an energy analysis. We measure the energy of the voice, and we do this during a short time, and depending on that, we decide if the call is answered by an answering machine or if it's answered by a human. This detection delays between 2 and 4 seconds, and in some cases the user doesn't want that the recipient of the call waits these 2, 3, 4 seconds to get connected to the queue. So in that case, you could disable this, and you could select a call flow that transfer the call to the queue immediately. So as soon as the recipient answers the call, we will be transferring to the queue. Um, if you want to enable it, we will be able to execute two different call flows, one on the case of human answer and another one in the case of answering machine. For example, in the case of human answer, we could use the survey, and in the case of answering machine, we could use the leave voicemail. Okay, and we can decide if we want to retry calls answered by an answering machine or not. This is something that you as a user need to define, because maybe leaving the voicemail is a successful contact, or maybe not. This is something that only you know. So you decide if calls answered by an answering machine should be retried or not. Uh, Here in the text-to-speech language section, you will be able to select the language. You will see that you have uh, different languages. Well, for English, you have different variants. Um, and these are the languages supported by Google Text-to-Speech, Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. And once you select the language, you will be able to select the voice. Here you will see that you have plenty of variants, different voices, female voices, male voices. Well, you can select the voice you want, and you can click here this link, and you will be able to see the list of supported voices. You can search here, for example, for English, and you can check any voice here, play it with this button, and you can listen to the voice and select the voice that is good for you. You don't need to make a call with every voice here and receive a call with every voice to understand how that voice sounds. Okay, so you can play around with this page and select the voice in advance. Finally, here for the blacklist section, you can specify uh, different blacklists that you define in the settings section. In settings, you define blacklists, and from the campaign, you can use them. When a number to call is found in a blacklist that you define here, the number will not be called. It will be skipped. Okay, so we click save, and this way we are creating the campaign. And once we have the campaign created, we need to add numbers to call. To add numbers to call, we will click add numbers here, and we have two options. We can upload a a CSV file, or we can select manual entry. In this case, I will select manual entry so we can see the format that should be used, but the selecting the upload file option is exactly the same. The format is exactly the same. You have two options here. You can use only numbers like here. So in the numbers to call text box here, you just put one number under the other, and this way you are calling these numbers and you are not providing any value associated with those numbers. But if you want to provide, for example, customer name, like in the example that we had here with the call flow, that we are leaving a voicemail with a customer name, you can use this format. This format includes numbers and values associated with that number. In this case, the first row will be a headers row, where you define first always the phone number, then the comma separator, and the variables. These are the variable names that you will be using: customer name and then due balance. So after the first headers row, you have one row for each number that you will be calling. And for each row, you specify first the number, then the comma separator, the customer name, another comma separator, and the due balance at the end. You click next, you will see a preview of the data that we have, and then you click add numbers, and you will see the results dialog, where you can confirm that 5 numbers were added and no number was skipped. Numbers could be skipped if you are adding, for example, duplicated numbers, or the number has a wrong format, like characters that are not numbers. In those cases, numbers can be discarded, and you will see the information, the details of which numbers were discarded and why. So we click OK, and here we have our campaign. This campaign, as you can see, is in draft mode. This means that the campaign can be edited. If you open the campaign, all the parameters can be edited. You can change the font system that you will be using, the extension that you will be using. You can change the predictive dialer mode to power dialer mode, for example. Any parameter can be changed. You can change the call flow, well, whatever. Uh, because the campaign is in draft, it didn't start yet. If you want the campaign to start, you click this activate campaign button and the campaign will start making calls. If you have a campaign that has already started, then some fields will not be editable. For example, you cannot change the call flow of a campaign that is already being executed, because you cannot change what the campaign is doing in the middle of the campaign. You cannot change the phone system that will be used for that campaign, because it already started making calls. You cannot change that. But for example, you can change the tags that the campaign has to restrict the visibility. You can change the calling intensity level. You can change the working times. All those parameters are something that you can change once the campaign starts. Here, for example, you can see that this information is read-only. All this information is read-only. Working times in this case is read-only as well, because the campaign is already finished. Um, but well, the editability of the fields depends on the status of the campaign. Um, Something else that you can do, if you when you start running campaigns, you will see that you have new rows for every campaign that you run. And if you start running campaigns every day, you will see that this list starts growing and growing, and that could be a problem. In order to avoid this list to grow too much and only have here the list of campaigns that you are dealing with now at this moment, you can archive campaigns that you are not interested in anymore. So here, for example, you have two finished campaigns. You can archive them and they will be removed from this view. Okay, they will not be visible anymore. And if you need to access those campaigns because you need to check anything, you can add the filter archive and you will see the archive campaigns. And from here you can unarchive them as well and move them back to the main list. Okay. Uh, Okay, so here you have other actions that you can execute. Like the first button here is to add or remove numbers to the campaign. You can select this one and remove the number. You can search for a number ending in 2, for example, and then you can click here and delete it. You can add more numbers from here as usual using the same procedure. You can export the numbers that you will be calling to a CSV file. And okay, so from the list of campaigns, you can duplicate the campaign. For duplicate, you have two options, as you can see here. You have the duplicate campaign and the duplicate ignoring numbers. If you duplicate the campaign, you will duplicate all the configuration and all the numbers to call. With this option, on the other case, you will just duplicate the configuration, but the numbers list will be empty. You can quickly view the reports for the campaign, and depending on the status, you can archive or unarchive or activate, pause, cancel the campaign, etc.